Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about a classic album I love. If 30-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as on TikTok. So before we get into this week's episode, I have a huge announcement to make. Okay, so back when I was on the Play That Rock and Roll podcast, BB Buell and her new book, Rebel Soul, came up in conversation. BB is a singer, author, muse to the greats, all-around rock and roll woman. She's kind of the encapsulation of everything this channel is about. Well, thanks to the host, Joe, I got to co-interview BB Buell on the new episode of Play That Rock and Roll. Thank you so much, Joe, for having me be a part of this, and thank you, BB, for your time and your wonderful words of advice. You can watch/listen to this episode now. It's linked in my description. And yes, this is Buddy snoozing with my copy of Rebel Soul. BB loves her critters, and I thought she'd appreciate this photo. Announcement time over. On to this week's album. Way back in May or June, I had a quick audience poll on my community tab to pick an album to fill a gap in my schedule. Harvest and Transformer were really close in the votes, so I ended up just doing both. But I never forgot about this week's album. It's wild and strange and very much worth talking about. I will always get to the last place album in my polls, even if it takes me 5 months to do it. This week's album is Wheels of Fire by Cream. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what next week's album is gonna be. Sometimes I host polls, so you get to pick what albums I cover next. We just had one of those. And that's where I make announcements like me interviewing famous people. You can find all of that on my channel. You do not want to miss out. All right, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a US repress from 1968. I got this on my first trip to Horizon Records down in Greenville, South Carolina. Being very fresh to the music of the 60s and 70s back then, I was obsessed with the movie Almost Famous. I longed for a Penny Lane coat of my own, and oh, how I wanted all of Will Miller's Suitcase albums. Now I have all of those Suitcase albums. Pretty much every location Wheels of Fire was released in got a different version of this album. Over here in the US, we got the full Wheels of Fire package with the studio album on one disc and live on another, all packaged together. The UK, Japan, Australia. This was split into 2 albums, Wheels of Fire in the studio and live at the Fillmore. Keep that detail in mind for later. So let's talk about this cover art. We have an illustration by Martin Sharp, who also did the art for Disraeli Gears. This is not coming out of the shiny sleeve. My Disraeli Gears is destroyed. My Wheels of Fire is not, though. My US copy is still holding itself together, and it's this black design on silver foil. If you have a UK Wheels of Fire, your studio album would be this, while the live album would be the negative. If you're one of those lucky ducks down under or out in Japan, then your Wheels of Fire is black on gold, and your live album is silver. Damn, this has me wanting to collect them all. It's certainly a lot more feasible than collecting all the variations of Master of Reality. As gorgeous as this foil cover is in person, my favorite is the gatefold. We've got this pair of eyes with the third eye open, can't forget that, in this acid rainbow pointillism style. It feels like the continuation of that Disraeli Gears art, but this feels like something a little stronger than acid. Opening this cover up to this explosion of color, it's shocking. I wish I could experience it for the first time again. Even the shock of seeing this cover for the first time in an ad in, say, Rolling Stone. This would have been printed in black and white. Beautiful illustrations, brilliant design all around. I wish I saw this on more best of lists. On Wheels of Fire, we've got Jack Bruce on vocals, bass, some acoustic guitar, cello, harmonica, recorder, and something called a calliope. Ginger Baker on drums, various percussion, glockenspiel, and lead vocals, if you could even call them that, on Press Rat and Warthog. And my problematic fave on guitar and lead vocals on Crossroads, Eric Clapton. Our special guests for this one are co-lyricists Pete Brown and Mike Taylor. Wheels of Fire was produced by, get ready for one of the coolest names I've ever read on this series, Felix Pappalardi. He contributed quite a few instruments too: viola, organ, trumpet, and bells. The studio portion of this album was engineered by Tom Dowd and Adrian Barber. The live portion, engineered by Bill Halverson, mixed by Adrian Barber. Roll a sparkly silver transition. So I'd always seen Wheels of Fire and Disraeli Gears as sister albums, but aside from the art being drawn by the same guy, I never really knew why. Well, come to find out, these kind of are sister albums. Disraeli Gears was supposed to be released for the summer of '67, but it was delayed because Atlantic wanted different album art. During this limbo period, through July to November-ish of '67, Cream went ahead and started working on the next one, what would become Wheels of Fire. We'll get into the recording process soon, but for now, let's contextualize the bad boy. How did we get a record like Wheels of Fire? The thing about Cream is that they were essentially two different bands. First, you have Studio Cream, mixing blues standards with psyched out originals. This is what we heard on Disraeli Gears. Then you have Live Cream, who played fewer songs, but were able to stretch them out to 10, 15, even 20 minutes long. Cream was a damn good live act, but their gig at the RKO 58th Street Theater just hadn't worked out. They had to expand their scope, so they go on this extensive tour across the US. Here I introduce to you the October 15th, 1967 recording of Cream at the Grandy Ballroom in Detroit. On this night, they opened their set with quite possibly the best Tales of Brave Ulysses they ever played, before the record was even out. This heaviness, this exact blend between bluesy roots and more complex stylings, this was the Cream that Cream wanted to be on their next album. There was just one problem. You see, working together was getting harder and harder because Cream kind of fucking hated each other. They only barely tolerated each other for the sake of the music. Jack and Ginger famously butted heads. Eric wasn't really crazy about Jack either, but from Jack's point of view as the frontman, it couldn't have been easy to be consistently outshone by your guitarist and your drummer. To keep things as egalitarian as possible, we don't want anybody tearing each other's heads off here, this is how the next album is gonna go. Jack co-writes 4 songs with poet Pete Brown, Ginger co-writes 3 with jazz pianist Mike Taylor, and Eric picks 2 blues tunes to cover: Sittin' on Top of the World and Born Under a Bad Sign, made famous by Albert King and Howlin' Wolf respectively. The first 3 songs worked on were White Room, Sittin' on Top of the World, and Born Under a Bad Sign. They recorded these in July and August of '67 at IBC Studios in London. White Room was started first and finished last, so keep in mind for every window of time I'm mentioning, White Room was worked on a little bit. Early on, Felix and the guys realized that the technology at IBC just wasn't cutting it. This was the wall that a lot of psych groups were hitting at the time. Jimi Hendrix's group, The Experience, is grappling with this same issue as we speak. Looking at Cream's touring schedule, it's decided that they'll record at Atlantic Studios in New York City whenever they're stateside. After a break to gig some more, sessions resume on September 9th and 10th, this was when Sittin' on Top of the World and Born Under a Bad Sign were finished. Exactly a month later, on October 9th and 10th, work begins on Pressed Rat and Warthog and a song called Anyone for Tennis. They'd finish these two up in December. After another break to tour, Cream hunkers down in Atlantic for a week from February 13th to 22nd to just hammer out as much as they possibly could. This week gave us Passing the Time, As You Said, Politician, and Deserted Cities of the Heart. So for those of you keeping track at home, so far, over the span of 7 months, Cream has only managed to log about 2 weeks in the studio. Once it's all said and done, even with this high-tech recording facility at their disposal, Cream's chemistry and skill just can't be captured in a studio environment. The people need to hear what this band really sounds like. So Felix orders a mobile unit out to California to capture Cream live. They record 6 nights, including 2 at the Winterland Ballroom and 2 at the Fillmore. From everything they got, Felix picked Toad from the Fillmore for Ginger's extended drum solo, Train Time from the Winterland because it featured Jack's harmonica playing, and renditions of Robert Johnson's Crossroad Blues and Howlin' Wolf's Spoonful from the Winterland for Eric's soloing abilities. So that's 75% from the Winterland and 25% from the Fillmore. And they called this Live at the Fillmore? Why do the 60s keep doing this? Those were the days it started and finished last. They knocked that one out in about 3 days' time. Anyone for Tennis was cut from the final track listing in favor of this song. The last of the mastering process was completed in June, 11 months after work on Wheels of Fire began, but there were some problems. The songs recorded in February were mastered with something called the Haso CSG system. This was a piece of equipment developed by A&M Records out in California. It was supposed to yield stereo recordings that were compatible with mono systems. What ended up happening is the stereo center channel just got mauled. It was either shoved to the left or the right in mono. Results ranged from blurry to just zonking it out of existence. Eric's solo and his rhythm guitar too on Deserted Cities of the Heart was most affected, but with just weeks to go until the deadline, they really couldn't fix it. Just how close were we to the deadline? You'll see very soon, but until then, the track listing of Wheels of Fire goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have White Room, followed by Sittin' on Top of the World. Then Passing the Time, and side 1 closes with As You Said. Opening up side 2, we have Pressed Rat and Warthog, followed by Politician. Then Those Were the Days. Next, Born Under a Bad Sign, and Disc 1 closes with Deserted Cities of the Heart. Opening up Disc 2, we have Crossroads, closing out side 1 is Spoonful. Opening up the second side, we have Train Time, and the album closes with Toad. Wheels of Fire was released June 14th, 1968 in the US, and August 9th in the UK. Put a big fat asterisk next to that US date. I honestly doubt this is accurate. To supposedly mix half the record on June 12th and 13th and releasing it on the 14th is not physically possible. Remember, this is vinyl. You have to have the time to physically press the records. So I deadass think somebody wrote this release date down wrong. It wouldn't be the first time this has happened in rock and roll. But if you're up on your lore, you'd know that June 14th would become a significant date in Clapton history. Anyone for Tennis wound up as a single and the opening theme for the Savage 7. Crossroads and White Room were also issued as singles, but before this thing is even out, things are looking grim for Cream. Their manager Robert Stigwood overbooked them to through 67 and into the front half of 68. The effects of that are starting to show. The stress of touring made Jack and Ginger hate each other even more. They'd get in these nasty fights. one of them turning physical. I know we joke about Cream beating each other up and beating other people up on this channel, but this one was really bad. They beat the shit out of each other. Eric cried after having to break it up. Otherwise, Eric's been riding high. He's got this pretty girlfriend that Jimmy Page is totally not gonna steal from him, and he's been riding high on the whole Clapton is God thing. But, he's about to take a huge hit to his ego. So back in March, Cream played this gig at Brandeis University. A student there, one John Landau, wrote a particularly scathing review of the show. It made the rounds in the student paper, was sent off to Rolling Stone magazine, and got published in the May 11th issue. Now, normally, this wouldn't have been a big deal. Eric might have just missed it, but Cream had a feature written by Jan Wenner, running in the very same issue. Eric loved Rolling Stone. It was his favorite magazine, so he was super excited about this. He picks up an issue to read the Wenner piece over a meal, flips it open to the Landau review, and this is what he saw. Landau did give Cream credit where credit was due. He preferred some numbers live to what he'd heard on the albums and said all three guys were masters of their craft. However, what I ended up hearing was three virtuosos romping through their bag, occasionally building it into something, occasionally missing the mark altogether, but always in a one-dimensional style that made no use of dynamics, structure, or any other elements of rock besides drum licks and guitar riffs. Ouch. And that's just in the first paragraph. It doesn't get much better than here. NSU is deemed a, quote, terrible song. On this one, Eric was unoriginal, trapped by cliches. His problem is identified as having, quote, massive potential, but not yet fulfilling it. I have to say, out of everything here, that much turned out to be right. Still, there's quips like repetitious and terribly boring in reference to both Ginger and Eric soloing. Eric and Jack are called out for getting in an argument on stage. It rags on the guys for rarely venturing out of 4/4 time, and we can't forget the wondrous closer. When they get over their virtuosity hang-up, which is what I think their kind of virtuosity is, we may really see something. Eric freaks out and faints in the middle of the restaurant. Landau's review triggered a full-on crisis. Back then, not just anybody could throw their music opinions out into a public forum. Oh my god, imagine that. Rolling Stone, Cream, NME, Melody Maker, they had a lot of weight in the music world. One bad review could spell the end of your band, and Eric knew this. Jack and Ginger saw the other side of this issue, being that music critics are a crock of shit. But it was too late. Eric got this review in his head. Fun fact, this issue of Rolling Stone, incredibly hard to find. It's so rare that a full transcript of Landau's Cream review just straight up doesn't exist. Trust me, I've looked, not even Rolling Stone themselves have it. So if you happen to have a copy of this issue and can fill in the blanks of the transcript, please contact me. To add insult to injury, Jan Wenner himself reviews Wheels of Fire in a later issue of Rolling Stone and trashes it. The opening line says it all. Cream is good at a number of things. Unfortunately, songwriting and recording are not among them. Now, Bob Dylan's backing band had just made their debut as, well, the band. Eric heard that record, Music from the Big Pink, and was blown away. It set him on this idea that country rock was the future of rock and roll, and that's where he was gonna go. On July 10th, before Wheels of Fire had even seen a UK release, Cream announces they've broken up. Upon hearing their big ticket act is donezo, Atlantic freaks out, begs for one more album, and Stigwood cobbles together a short farewell tour through October of '68. This was how we got Goodbye Cream. This version of Badge notably features Eric's new bestie, George Harrison. By the time this comes out in February of '69, Cream is thoroughly over, and rumors are swirling that Eric is linking up with Steve Winwood. It's right behind me, isn't it? Yeah, I figured. But before that, Clapton donned a frankly iconic crocheted sweater to form the greatest supergroup that never was, the Dirty Mac. They played a one-off gig for the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus in October, but this special didn't see the light of day for many, many years. You can thank The Who playing too well for that. Now you might be wondering what happened to the— You may be wondering what happened to the rest of those recordings from the Fillmore and the Winterland. Well, they became Live Cream and Live Cream 2. It's funny, the overall legacy of Wheels of Fire is a little more amorphous, but White Room remains a signature Cream song, and the Crossroads solo is consistently hailed as one of the best and most influential guitar solos ever. So, what do I think of Wheels of Fire? Going in, we all know what my favorite Clapton project is, at least you should, and we all know which project I am now forever associated with. Seriously, if you Google the Blind Faith album art, I am on the first page of search results. Why? But of the Cream albums, Disraeli Gears was my favorite. Disraeli was almost this week's episode. I played the hell out of this one like 4 years ago. It was my favorite until I listened to it back and realized I don't like it anymore. I love Tales of Brave Ulysses. I've always liked Swalber and Outside Woman Blues, but that's kind of it. Disraeli went from a Vinyl Monday possibility to a contender for I don't like. Immediately thereafter, I went back and listened to Wheels of Fire, and I didn't remember liking this nearly as much as I do now. In 2 weeks' time, you'll understand why I should not be doing a double album right now. Getting Wheels of Fire's two biggest problems out of the way first. Number one, it's bloated. The Ginger tracks are the biggest offenders. Those Were the Days is utterly forgettable, and Pressed Rat and Warthog is entirely pointless. It's just taking up space. Ginger couldn't have contributed anything better. Like, I know what he's capable of. I've heard Do What You Like. Having this complete turn-off of a song, Open Side 2, was just a bad call. As for Passing the Time, I want to like it. I really do, but there's this 5 seconds or so of totally psychedelic dirge in the very beginning that just makes me want a whole song of that. It's like we walked into the middle of a jam and they switched up on us. Why did we even have to make the verse sound like this? The next biggest weakness, which is unfortunately common among psych albums, the technology available just couldn't capture what Cream was doing. Deserted Cities falls victim to these limitations in both recording and mastering. It's unfortunately mushy. You have to listen really closely to pick out what's what. The whole album sounds a bit hollow, and I think the guys knew this. That's my biggest issue with Disraeli. I think they could have explored their own artistry more. But you have to have some restraint. This hollowness might have been why tracks like Pressed Rat and Those Were the Days have so much extraneous instrumentation, like bells. Holy hell, there are a lot of bells. Why are we obsessed with bells? On to the strengths. Jack Bruce is the MVP of the studio album for everything he does besides playing the bass. The originals he contributed are the best of the bunch, starting with White Room. This is one kick-ass opener. When I heard this after my run-through of Disraeli Gears, I went, this song's chord structure is really similar to Tales of Brave Ulysses. It's even more similar on that live recording from the Grandie. I thought I was losing my mind until I read Jan Wenner's review of this album. He confirmed White Room is basically a rewrite of Ulysses. Wenner didn't see the value in this, but I do. That first section is offset into 5/4. See John Landau, Cream can break out of 4/4 time. And then into 3/4, there's this beautiful, memorable procession into our song, and a little epic thanks to the timpani. I love how the viola links up with the guitar to sound like one unit, and we have lyrics by a literal actual poet, Pete Brown. Look at the lyrics of Ulysses, right? Tiny purple fishes, swimming through turquoise, a girl's brown body, Aphrodite on a crimson shell. That song is saturated in heady neon colors. Then, look at White Room. A white room with black curtains, black roofs, silver horses, the gold of dawn. We took that original song and desaturated it. All the saturation went to the instruments instead, it sounds like. I'll wait in the queue when the trains come back, lie with you where the shadows run from themselves. These are surreal lyrics describing the feeling of longing and impossible desolate love. Eric's use of the wah-wah pedal creates some variation over this drive. This is what a guitarist can do when he actually knows how to use the wah-wah. As you said, spotlights Jack. It's all Jack, really. His voice and his cello playing. I never knew how much I loved or wanted strings on a Psych album until I heard this song. Pair the cello with Felix's viola and you get something really unique to Wheels of Fire. It's a smoky, mysterious song in open tuning, which allows Jack to pull some ridiculous chord changes out of his pocket. He's playing with different modes and scales in a way that might have been influenced by Eastern music. This song, no doubt in my mind, planted the seed in Eric's brain for him to bring back violin on the Blind Faith record. This album's production doesn't always work, but when it does, it really does. That's Politician. It's got the bones of a great song. It's slimy, sleazy goodness with lyrics dripping in innuendo. Jack sells it with his delivery. That sigh on Political Man is electric. Then you get to Eric's solo, or dueling solos. There's at least 2 of them, maybe 3, and they're getting swapped around like cups on a table. There's a coin under one of them, but you lose track of which one it is. I can't tell which one is meant to be lead because they're all wound together so well. It's fun to try and follow one for as long as you can. This kicks ass. I wonder if Tom Dowd had a hand in this eureka moment because, as we'll hear in some later albums he's worked on, he had an intentional, intriguing, wonderful way of filling space on a song. And now for this Studio Discs aha moment, that which does not get the recognition it deserves. Deserted Cities of the motherfucking heart. The last 60 seconds is one of the best minutes recorded in all of rock and roll history, and I finally get to rave about it. Let's go. Eric's creating a fantastic tension with his rhythm part. I wish I could pull Jack's acoustic back so we could just get a little bit more of it. And this cello solo is our brief solace. I like the time change. This whole song, this whole part of the album really has been barely held together. It's got this propulsion, see, I learned a new word, that keeps it running almost ahead of itself. There's this amazing sense of urgency that I can't get enough of. That tension builds and builds and builds until finally it snaps. The last 10 seconds are this almost proto-metal breakdown that I cannot get enough of. I listened to the whole song for that moment. Ginger hauls back the time as if to pull the reins on this chariot, steering it into the ground to crash in a ball of fire. The power of this song just cannot be contained. As for Eric's picks, I'm pretty sure it's impossible to record a bad Born Under a Bad Sign. Cream killed it. Albert King also killed it. Like, I know White Room is one of Eric's better known solos, and Crossroads, we're getting there. But we need to talk about the Born Under a Bad Sign solo more. I love his phrasing here. You know, for being in a blues band, Jack couldn't always sound bluesy. He had a very prominent vibrato in his voice, kind of like a male Stevie Nicks, or perhaps a sheep. I go back and forth on the rest of Sittin' on Top of the World, but man, did Jack nail that last verse. He didn't have much of a head voice, so he just threw that belt up to the rafters and hope it stuck. On to the live album. While Jack is the MVP of the studio record, the forces of live Cream were Eric and Ginger. The amazing thing about Cream live is that it's basically 3 soloists all soloing on top of each other. It should not work, but it does. I first noticed that quality when I listened to Crossroads. There is no easiest part to play on this song. All of this is incredibly technical, but it comes together in such an accessible way that it made this song a great single. What makes the Crossroads solo so special is how it showed off Eric's 2 strongest qualities in this time of his career, his phrasing and his vibrato. Eric had a knack for creating memorable guitar lines that just bore into your head, and the 2 solos in this song play off each other, conversational in nature. The first is the wind-up and the second is the pitch. What makes it sound so good is the bend of the string. It's not volume, it's all touch. He'd really perfect the vibrato with his more country-influenced stuff. He made it sound almost like a slide. Everyone's really got it on Spoonful. This isn't my personal favorite recording. That would have to be Oakland Coliseum. That one is sexy, but this one is still damn good. Again, Jack's voice didn't always work for blues, so he had to make up for it with the ad-libs. Eric's got a nasty snarl on that opening riff. I love his tone here. His tone was sometimes a little shrill for me, the Fool SG he played on Disraeli especially. I much prefer how this instrument sounds. I know he was playing his 335 mostly. By 68, he had a Firebird and a Telly also. His improvisational skills were bar none. These long, wandering tunes aren't remarkable until you remember he was coming up with this shit on the fly. The thing about Cream, or any blues-based band from this era really, is you have to pack your patience. It takes a while for everyone to hit the same wavelength, but once they do, it's worth it. This version is more understated. The flame burns for about 7 or 8 minutes before dying down quietly, and that's when the song finally returns to the central motif. A band is only as good as their drummer, and Cream had the best of the best in absolute madman Ginger Baker. Ginger had a wonderful feel for dynamics and texture that came from him being a jazz drummer. He harnessed that to the fullest extent on Toad. He's just flexing everything he's got in his trick bag. It's kind of ridiculous. He's got the rolls, he's got the fills, he's got positive and negative space. He controls the meter like putty in his hand. When I first noticed this pattern he'd wind up reusing on Do What You Like, I went feral. This was his signature. It was his thing. If but a little long, all of this is so easy for me to pore over that by that last minute, I've totally forgotten what the central motif was. The riff's okay. The riff doesn't matter. However, now that I've heard that tambourine, I can't unhear it. It is horrifically out of time. As for Train Time, Jan Wenner described it best. Jack Bruce is not very good with a harmonica, and it amazes me why he plays it at all. Overall, Wheels of Fire is a collection of disjointed parts, that which could never quite come together as one whole. From its structure to the individual songs, even the packaging, this album wants to be 2 things at once. It's funny, by design, this really didn't have to be a double album, but all of its best moments, saving graces really, came from it being a double album. It's paradoxical, a diverse and exciting album with lots of twists and turns, even if they don't always work. You gotta give these guys a hand for taking the risks that they did. Everything builds up to this great smash apart and brilliant blaze, not unlike the band who made it. Wheels of Fire should not work, but by the skin on its teeth, it does. My personal favorites on this one are White Room, Politician, Born Under a Bad Sign, Deserted Cities, Crossroads, and Spoonful. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays ever, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That's maybe the shiniest Vinyl Monday we'll ever do. That was Wheels of Fire by Cream. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Cream in the studio versus live? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet might tell you, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!